Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of AoS Close-Ups. This week we're going to take a look at the Tzeentch Sorcerer Lord and Chaos Spawn War Scrolls. We're going to explore both of these together because even though they can be brought separately, we'll most likely see them both on the table more often than not. There are many paths to damnation that a champion of chaos can travel in their pursuit of immortality, but some of these lead to destinations that are more than one bargained for. Enter the Chaos Spawn. Chaos Spawns are the result of receiving one too many gifts from a dark god. For each deed a champion accomplishes, the god may see it fit to gift that champion with inhuman strength, unnatural swiftness, the ability to breathe fire, and many other powers that will help the follower of chaos kill in the name of their chosen patron. However, for every champion that receives one of these boons, a dozen others will receive gifts with questionable advantages, such as a writhing tentacle in place of a limb, an additional mouth in the abdomen, and eyeballs in the palms of one's hands, and other grotesque oddities. Regardless of the functionality of the gifts, over time a mortal's body can only withstand so many changes before one ceases to be what he once was, and the mind of the mortal is irreversibly changed, his identity lost forever. In this moment, that champion becomes a mindless embodiment of chaos, a slave of destruction, whose life is ironically and invariably short. Like perverse snowflakes, no two spawn are ever alike. Some are mocking mutated recreations of natural creatures, while others are incomprehensible masses of flesh. But they all deliver death. Of course, not all chaos spawns are misguided followers of chaos. Sadly, some are twisted remnants of brave heroes who dared challenge the might of the dark gods and their followers, thereby suffering a fate worse than death. One such way to meet this unfortunate end is at the arcane power of a Tzeentch Sorcerer Lord. While each of the gods sans corn boasts its own sorceress minions, Tzeentch is truly the favored patron to those dedicated to the dark arts. These include shamans, soothsayers, wizards, and scholars, who are all susceptible to the influence of Tzeentch and their thirst for more knowledge, slowly changing into masters of anarchic subterfuge and pure arcane might. However, many times, Tzeentch blesses these sorcerers with magics beyond what they can control, causing them to become mindlessly insane and tearing their bodies apart with mutations. However, those who are able to harness such great power still lose much of themselves as they bargain away their souls to control such immense raw might. With this power, they can cause steel to fall to ash, turn a warrior's blood to copper, or change an opponent into chaos spawn to slaughter his once brothers in arms. We'll take a look at the Chaos Spawn first, though to be honest, stat-wise, there really isn't much to look at. This guy is abysmal. If you're playing in a format that puts a hard cap on scrolls, wounds, or assigns points even, he's going to be a wasted slot and not even worth the time to pass by when you're looking through your scrolls. If you're playing this format and you happen to have a paper copy, I would even encourage you just to rip that page out. But for those of you who play in a less rigid playing environment, well, check out the Spawn's rules, and right away you'll notice it's sporadic. Just like you'd expect, it has a random movement, it has a random amount of attacks. It's hitting and wounding on average with nothing in the rend department and only doing a singular wound if it gets one through. So he falls flat on offense. Then you add to this an armor value of 5, and well, the defense is lacking also. Just plain and simple, he's not that great. He does, however, have a nifty little rule though called Writhing Tentacles, which allows the spawn to hit on a base 3 up when you roll doubles. But you need to consider you only have a 17%-ish chance of rolling a doubles on any single roll, and you don't want to mistakenly consider this a key feature of the figure. And even if you were to roll, say, the golden boxcars, you're likely only going to hit 9 times, wound 4 to 5, which is pretty sweet, only if you throw this guy at a unit of t-shirts. Otherwise, this is the definition of meh. Considering you won't be rolling out of your mind every turn for this guy at least. But despite this, I do want to say Spawn have some great uses that we'll get into right after we look at this guy's counterpart, the Tzeentch Sorcerer Lord. The Tzeentch Sorcerer Lord is a great piece to have in your army. Of course, to be fair, his stats in combat make the Chaos Spawn look like Skulltaker, but where he lacks in martial skill, he more than makes up for it in the ranged threat aspect. His shooting attack isn't great, but it is better than average and inflicts D3 wounds, so he's not going to eliminate things each turn, but is a very good pile attack on any other dedicated shooting you're aiming at the units. and it works in a pinch as an opportunity attack against any monsters that only need a little bit more of a push to go down. Where he really shines though, and where we tie the relationship with this Chaos Spawn together, is his magical attack called Bolt of Change, and it functions just the same as Arcane Bolt, but at a higher threshold, with the added bonus that for every model that dies, you can roll a dice, and if any of those dice is a 4-up, you add 1 spawn to your army within 3 inches of the target unit. Lastly, I just want to mention the final ability, Magic Attuned, which states that if he rolls doubles, whether he successfully casts a spell or not, he can attempt another cast of a different spell. This is, again, not likely to happen too often in your games. It is, just like the Spawn's ability, only about a 17-ish% chance of happening, but it's something you definitely don't want to forget if it does come up. After you cast something maybe like Bolt of Change, you then can cast Mystic Shield, summon some demons, or if you bring my personal favorite, Dragon Ogres, you can cast Summon Lightning. So with the pure randomness and lackluster stats of a Chaos Spawn, you are going to have a hard time finding a role for it. But being able to create a spawn in the middle of the game does open up some interesting advantages. First of all, you need to identify your best targets for Bolt of Change. As Bolt of Change only does 3 max wounds, targeting a model with 4+ wounds is taking away even an opportunity to create a spawn, and essentially puts you in a position of trying to inflict the same damage at a higher threshold than Arcane Bolt. So I would say don't use this spell at anything over 4+ wounds. Also consider 3 wound models tenuous territory as targets, as you are hoping to roll max against these guys, and it just doesn't seem worth the risk of failing the spell. And again, I would probably just use Arcane Bolt in this situation. I think where Bolt really excels though is definitely against 1 wound models, as it gives you more dice attempts at creating that spawn. So secondly, you may be wondering, well, why is it even worth the trouble to create something that's going to have a hard time finding its way out of a wet paper bag? And to this I'd say it's because Bolt of Change does more than just the 3 wounds to a unit. It has the potential to do more by turning 1 to 3 wounds worth of enemy models into 5 wounds of your own. If you look at the D3 as your initial investment, then any additional wounds are added interest. And if you don't earn any interest, who cares? You already got what you paid for. So thirdly, the creation and positioning of the spawn is actually more game impacting than any wounds it might cause. If you can create a spawn from a unit, particularly if it happens to be a large one, you can place the spawn in a tactically advantageous position. Remember, the spawn is deployed within 3 inches of a unit, which means it's in combat. You could place it on the far side of this 3-inch limitation to pull a unit away from an objective during the combat phase, where that unit will need to pull all its models within 3 inches of that spawn. If the unit you placed ends up being a largish unit, say they only have 1-inch threat range, then the 5 wounds on the spawn will probably be enough to tie it up for 2 combats, and that will give you a chance to take advantage of the unit being out of position. And if you're lucky enough to do this repeatedly, you might even see yourself daisy chaining your opponent's units away from its position entirely. It can also be used to merely pin a unit in place for a turn that is trying to move away from maybe your slower, more dangerous units. So I think the Tzeentch Sorcerer offers you some interesting movement control with his missile attack. Not to mention, he has the always valuable Mystic Shield, which will let your units be a little bit more sturdier in combat, maybe staying in that combat an extra turn or 2. Add this with the opportunity to cast both these spells in a single turn, and the Sorcerer then becomes more than a one-dimensional magic missile sniper, though he's also still that. And that will conclude this episode of AoS Close-Ups. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, feel free to comment below, and thank you for watching.